What's up, everybody? Justin here. I'm back. We got some more CD collection, and a really special one this time. I can't wait to get into it. So, first, we are listening to Graveland, Immortal Pride. I think I've listened to Graveland and talked about Graveland a little bit. Oh, I did on the CDs. I love Graveland, especially this old Graveland material. It's just grim, cold, just decrepit sounding black metal. Very Polish, and I've talked at length at how much I like Polish black metal. So, Immortal Pride, probably almost my favorite material. You know, Glare Burning Churches, Immortal Pride, those two are neck and neck as far as Graveland material for me. So, we are trying to finish out the eyes of my CD collection, and we are at the Father's Incantation. So, Incantation, if you are familiar with my band, you probably have a good idea that I like Incantation. So, I got into Incantation probably around 1997, 98, somewhere in there. I remember reading about them when Diabolical Conquest came out. I remember it was kind of a big deal because they had left Relapse Records after the first two albums, and then they came back and they re-signed with Relapse and did Diabolical Conquest. Craig Pillard had left the band. Daniel Corchado from the Chasm took over on vocals, and it was a big deal. Now, I didn't know anything about Incantation before then, but I'm reading all this and understanding that it's a big deal. So, somewhere along the line, me and one of my best friends were shopping for CDs at the little local used CD store in the town we lived in, and he picked up this, Upon the Throne of Apocalypse, and took it home. I said, oh, that's a death metal band, and you know, I was nascent in my death metal experience then. By 97, I was into like Cannibal Corpse and Morbid Angel and Deicide, and I was branching out. But, so, my buddy Judd bought this, we took it home, and the first song, Abolishment of Immaculate Serenity, is the doomiest, sludgiest, fucking most wretched song that Incantation has ever written. So when we hear that pour out of the speakers and it barely gets above a crawl for 8 minutes, it's like, man, what is this? It sounded like hell. It just sounded disgusting and gross. And it was unlike any kind of death metal I've ever heard. And we listened to the CD, and it didn't really, you know, we never went back to it. Me and him used to listen to music together a lot, you know, driving around. I had a car, so I was always the one driving, and we'd check out, you know, new CDs. So, a couple years later, I saw Incantation on the Infernal Storm tour. And they played with, Incantation was on tour with Goat Whore and Nile. And this was in November of 2000. And Impaled and Exhumed and Impaled, Malignancy, and Mortician were on tour. Well, both tours hit Atlanta the same night, so they put them together at one big show, and it was fucking awesome. I went 100% to see Mortician. But every band was great. Incantation, I watched their entire set, and they play this cacophonous, murky, dismal kind of death metal, and it didn't draw me in. It didn't really catch me. So, and by that point, I liked Immolation, I liked Mortician, and I was still branching out into death metal, but you know, I liked Nile, I liked gore grind stuff like Impaled. Fell in love with Malignancy that night. they're probably my favorite brutal death metal band, one of my favorites. But I watched Incantation in November of 2000, 18 years ago, this month. I still have my ticket somewhere. I'll have to find it. So, over the next few years, I always kind of paid attention to what Incantation was doing via the metal magazines and, getting on the internet and forums. But I never really called myself a big fan of Incantation. So, in 2006, I started Father Defoul. And I said, I want to play dreary, doomy, dark death metal. Not referencing that's what bands like Incantation do. So we did our first demo and EP and start working on the full length. And a couple people said, hey, this stuff sounds like Incantation. I said, well, I know Incantation, but I'm not a huge fan. I don't listen to them. I don't have any of their stuff. I've seen them before. So I started listening to Incantation. I downloaded a couple of their albums. And instantly, it was all clear. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is the type of death metal that I'm meant to play. So I got everything. And I remember the first time I listened to Onward to Golgotha, it just, I couldn't make heads or tails of it. It was just chaos. And now, 12 years later, I know every riff on this record, but every time I listen to it, I will hear something different. I will hear a different note or a different trill or a different, texture, a dynamic that's layered in these songs. The way John McEntee and Craig Pillard wrote songs and the way they did these eerie, dissonant melodies and harmonies is just so out there and so unique. And Onward to Golgotha, it's right up there with Tomb of the Mutilated, Once Upon the Cross, Covenant, Altars of Madness. This record is a staple of 1990s death metal. But it's not like those records. It doesn't have the Swedish sound. It doesn't have the Florida sound. It's not pure New York like Suffocation or Immolation or Morpheus Descends. It sounds like Incantation. It's doomy and eerie and gross. So, this copy of Onward to Golgotha, I don't know. This is an original copy, the original Relapse copy, 1992. But I don't know where. I think I picked this up. I told a story several videos ago about some buddies of mine that were at Goodwill one day, and there were 100 death metal CDs that someone had dropped off. I think I plundered it out of that stack. So then their second album, Mortal Throne of Nazarene, I'm pretty sure I bought this one on eBay, shortly after just falling in love with Incantation. I snagged this one, and arguably this is my favorite Incantation record. The sound of Onward to Golgotha, I've read that it was a fluke. It sounds that way because that's just how the production happened, and they didn't want it to be that dismal. And the same thing with Mortal Throne. The final master on this apparently is not what it was supposed to be. And if you're an Incantation fan, you know that these are the same record. This one has, the track listing is backwards. So Abolishment, opening this record, that's the first Incantation song I ever heard, closes this record. And this is an alternate mix. And it's even darker and drearier. And it's hard for me to say, which one is my favorite now. But this is probably, which is my favorite of the two versions. But Mortal Throne is definitely, it's way up there neck and neck with Onward as my favorite record. My favorite Incantation record. It is just the quintessence, the quintessential, just the apex of their sound, of that early Incantation sound. My favorite song, my favorite Incantation song is the opening one, Demonic Incarnate. It's the blueprint for what I feel is the perfect Incantation song. It's 6 minutes long. There's 14 riffs in it, but it's just a steamroller. It's just a cacophony and just this nasty, just web of riffs. But it's not like a technical death metal record. It's not like Necrophagist. Incantation sounds like Incantation, and there's no other way to put it. But Incantation is the sound of just hellish, abysmal death metal. So then, throughout, that time, 2006, 2007, 2008, I start buying all of the Incantation records I can find. So I end up with the third album, Diabolical Conquest. So one of Incantation's staples, one of their hallmarks, was Craig Pillard's just ungodly fucking guttural roar. Just the lowest, just doomiest, grossest vocals. So when he left the band and they put out Diabolical Conquest, they bring on Daniel Corchado. And Daniel Corchado sings completely differently. He's higher. He enunciates more. You can understand him a lot more. And then the songs are not as just overbearing. They're not as murky and heavy. But the riffs are just fucking straight down the middle. They're just stabs. But I know a lot of people that this is their favorite Incantation record. They swear by this one. And I love it. It's right up there. It's probably definitely like number 3 or number 4 for me. I love it. So then their fourth record, The Infernal Storm, came out in 1997, 98. Well, this is dated 2000. So this is the one this is 2000. I saw them in November 2000. Daniel Corchado left. Mike Sayers comes on, plays guitar and sings. I saw them with him. He was great. It was, that show was great. And this record, I feel like, to me, it is Diabolical Conquest Part 2. It is a continuation of that sound. And there's some songs on here that are some of my favorite Incantation songs. Anoint the Chosen. Sempiternal Pandemonium. I love this record. I don't reach for it as much, but it's definitely still classic Incantation. In between those, when did this come out? I'd have to look it up. They put out an EP, The Forsaken Morning of Angelic Anguish. And it originally came out on, I think, Repulse Records. And then Relapse reissued it, and this is the reissue version. It's 5 songs. Craig Pillard came back to the band. I think this is in between Diabolical and Forsaken. Craig Pillard came back as a guest vocalist, as a session member, and did the new songs. And then there's some re-recorded older songs, I want to say, with Daniel Corchado. Yep. And then there's a Death cover. But this is another, it's a great release, and a couple of these songs are on Diabolical and Infernal Storm, but there's also a couple of songs that are exclusive to this that are more just classic late 90s Incantation. So then, they left Relapse Records for the second time, and they put out Blasphemy in 2002 on Necropolis Records. So, shout out to Ben, who loves Necropolis Records. Mike Sayers was on this record as well. He did he did 2 records with the band, and then Blasphemy is really kind of the lost Incantation record. It didn't get the push, it didn't get the media, it didn't get the attention that their first 4 records got, being on Relapse Records. And it was in that time, the end of the century, the beginning of the 2000s, death metal had really, really waned. It had gone down. This style of just obscure, nasty death metal wasn't popular. And, you know, there was a lot of generic shit out there. But this record, I mean, arguably, is just... This is probably my third favorite. It is the most, you know, unheralded Incantation record. And it's got just killer fucking classic songs on it. You know, Once Holy Throne, which is an instrumental, but it's fucking sick. Rotting with Your Christ. Uprising Heresy. I mean, this whole record fucking kills. I read an interview with John McEntee recently, and he ranked all of the Incantation records, and he said this was his favorite, which I was really surprised. So, then, I've got a few odds and ends. This came out semi-recently. This is Rotting Spiritual Embodiment, which that's a song off the first record. But this is a live set. Deathgasm, Necroharmonic, and IBEX Moon Records all co-released this. And this was a live set from 1991. And it's rough, it's raw, but it's Incantation in their infancy. They had one record out, and it's, you know, it's a testament to that time of the band. It's sick. So, just like there's two versions of Mortal Throne of Nazarene, there are two versions of Onward to Golgotha. And Blasphemous Cremation is an alternate recording of that first record. And there's only 6 songs on here. It's missing a couple of songs. One song, number 3, Godsend, is actually... let me see. Godsend is... I don't remember which one it is. But it was renamed on this record. I'd have to look it up. I'm going to flash it right here. So... anyway, it's also, you know, it's another look at the early stage of the band, and it's a great presentation, a great release. Necroharmonic, shout out to Roy, put this out. Put it out on vinyl as well. Now, also, every Incantation album I have on vinyl. I have several of them on tape. I mean, they're pretty much my favorite death metal band of all time. Funny story, when I got the record for this in the mail, it was limited to 666 copies. The first 100 of them were on red vinyl, and I got number 3. But when I got it, the fucking mailer was folded in half and the record was shattered. So I emailed Roy, and he sent me another one. So I have number 3, and I have number, like, 97. I thought it was pretty cool. So then, Unholy Massacre is a 2-disc set that Roy from Necroharmonic put out recently. And it is all of the Incantation demos, rehearsals, live stuff. It is a look at everything the band did leading up to the first album. And it's a really killer presentation put together. You know, full of flyers. Information, you know, pictures of the band. Really, really, really well done, and I'm hoping that soon I'm going to start the layout for the LP version of it for Necroharmonic, so that'll be sick if that happens. So, the sound on that is rough, and one thing you got to think about is Incantation. Incantation has a rough, you know, a nasty kind of abysmal sound, and when you're listening to those early records, you've really got to get past that if you're not used to it. And it took me a while to really start to tear apart the songs and listen to and hear the riffs and hear what they're doing. And I mean, when I listen to Mortal Throne now, I still uncover these melodies and leads and harmonies that are buried. But it's so fucking awesome. So then, Tribute to the Goat was originally released back, I want to say, in the 90s. And it is a... it's also the demos from that. It's just the demos. It was released on Elegy Records. There's only 1,000 copies. It's really hard to come by, but it got repressed by Archivist Records last year, and I have this cool version in like a book. but it has no booklet or anything, and I'm wondering if maybe I just didn't get the booklet. But this is number 487 of 999. This is not something I'm going to pull out and listen to because all this stuff is on other releases, but this is cool to have. Now, Incantation has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full lengths past Infernal Storm or past Blasphemy that I don't have. Decimate Christendom came out in 2004. I have it on vinyl. Primordial Domination came out in 2006. I have it on vinyl. Vanquished in Vengeance came out in 2012. There's a big gap. There's a 6-year gap. I don't own that one at all. And that's probably my least favorite Incantation album. It was a really underwhelming return for me. I didn't care for it. I listened to it a few times. I liked it. You know, it's Incantation, but it just didn't last for me. But then in 2014, they came out with Dirges of Elysium. And Dirges just is fucking sick. It sounds like a 90s Incantation record with a 2010 production. It's so fucking good. I have it on vinyl. And then their new record came out last year, Profane Nexus. It's a continuation of Dirges. It's a little cleaner. It's a little more straightforward in the songwriting, but it's still fucking awesome, and I have it on vinyl. So the only album I do not own in any form is Vanquished in Vengeance. And if I ever see it in the wild one day and it's not expensive, I'll grab it on CD or vinyl or whatever. So, and then, so I mentioned Upon the Throne of Apocalypse that my buddy bought this when we were 16 years old. It's the first time I heard them. This turned out to be a sought after Incantation release because there's only 1,000 copies of this. It was pressed one time on Relapse Records in 1995. And I remember I hit up my buddy who had it, who years ago moved to California, and he's not into metal or anything anymore. I said, do you still have that Incantation CD? And he said, yeah. He said, all of my music, all of my CDs from back then, all my metal stuff is in my parents' attic back in Georgia. And he said, if I ever go back home and think about it, I'll dig it out and you can have it. Well, that never happened. I have another friend, Jake from Graceless Records out of Tennessee. Jake put this up one day for sale, and I actually ended up trading him for it. So I have a copy of it now. Maybe one day I'll get Judd's and I'll have 2 copies. That'll be pretty cool. So that's it for Incantation. Like I said, if you know my band, you know that the Incantation influence is huge. And it got to a point on our second record and our third record where I was really like, I want to write songs that sound like Incantation. I want to get that. I want to bring all that influence in, and I want to write my version of it. I've never ripped off an Incantation riff. I've never purposely ripped off an Incantation riff. And I know that there's definitely parts of my band's stuff that sounds like Incantation. And they're a big influence. But not only in the songwriting, it's, they're an influence thematically and with imagery. They're the type of death metal that I want to be. Now, I met John McEntee in 2009. I drove to Chicago to see them. And we started talking, and I gave him some Father Befoul material. And he said, oh, I've heard of you guys. I hear that you sound like us. And he smiled. And I said, yeah. I said, you're a big influence. And he said, well, Autopsy is a big influence on my band. Black Sabbath is a big influence on my band. And that's what older bands are there for younger bands. And he was cool as shit about it. Over the next 10 years, me and John have crossed paths several times, and we always talk. And Father Befouled and Incantation got to play together this year. And it was a show with just us. And we hung out for a long time, and it was really cool. They always say don't meet your heroes. But I can say that John is a friend, and he is a fan of my band and a supporter of my band. And I'm glad that he lets us kind of carry that torch for unholy death metal. But he's a great guy, and I love what Incantation has done for me, and I love what Incantation has done for death metal. And here they are, 30 years, and they're still at it. They're touring the world right now. They're fucking amazing, you know? So I'm going to leave you with one more. Encrust. So the only reason I grabbed this is because it was the next CD after Incantation, and it sounds just like Incantation. Encrust was a death metal band from somewhere in South America, and they put out one record, ironically enough, on IBEX Moon Records, which was operated by John McEntee from Incantation. And this shit is brutal, fucking nasty Incantation-style death metal. It's cavernous and murky, but it's got those eerie riffs the way that John and Craig and all the other guys that have written in Incantation write. And I love this record. I absolutely love it, and not a lot of people talk about it. But I found out recently that the main guy behind this band quit metal, found Jesus, and I think that's funny. So I just, one extreme to the other. Anyway, let's talk about Incantation. Let's talk about what you've been listening to lately. If you've watched this far, tell me what you're listening to. Today I listened to both Avulsion CDs again that I talked about in my last video, and I listened to the new Iron Flame album, which I will talk about in my next new stuff video. Just killer traditional heavy metal. I listened to Side B of Appetite for Destruction today, and I listened to When I Cut the Throat by Otar. So I'm all over the place. I've been on a big black metal kick lately. I've been listening to lots of Murkvid and Isvind and The Black and Dissection, Immortal. I've been on a big, like, rainy, cold black metal kick, especially because it was rainy and nasty and cold here last week. Listen to Passage d'Ivre, however you say it, the self-titled record, per Ben's recommendation. Before Ben did his couple videos ago about buying that LP, he sent me a picture of it and said, you have to hear this record. So I downloaded it, and it sounds exactly how he explained it. It is just the coldest, dreariest, just draining black metal record. And, I mean, I put it on in headphones and just sunk into it. It was fucking great. So, anyway, that's it for this one. This is a long one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for everything you do, watching these videos and supporting me and supporting people like Ben and Canyon and Mike and Josh and all the other guys that do this. You know, I don't know why we do it, but it's cathartic to talk about all this shit we've been buying over the years. So let's talk about this stuff. I'll see you guys later.